Okay, thank you all for joining us today. I'm Karthick Ramakrishnan. I'm off screen for a second as I will show you a brief video that we made for the release of our report. We're so excited that you can join us. We have so many special guests from both outside the region and within the region. So without further ado, I will show you our sizzle reel for the report and what we hope will be important in changing the narrative about the Inland Empire and its future. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Hopefully that got you in the right mood and the right spirit. There's so much amazing work happening in our region, and it's really a privilege to be in the kind of position where we are with the kind of deep multi-stakeholder community work that we've done over the last 3 years. We're just a little over 3 years old now, and you know, we started off when we started our center, we said it was very intentional why we called ourselves a Center for Social Innovation, because the narrative of innovation is unfortunately not something that you hear too often when you hear about inland regions in California, not just the Inland Empire, but the Central Valley as well. But we know that there are amazing entrepreneurs, innovators, change makers, leaders in our regions. But that's not the dominant narrative, and we want to change that. That's how we started 3 years ago. If you'll see in all of our reports and the summits and the work that we do, we lift up the assets in the region, including our community partners who are experts in every which way, just as we have academic experts and experts in government as well, and in the for-profit sector. So I'll just give an overview of today. We're going to have a presentation from Gary Redberg, who is the lead author on this report. That it'll be released right at the conclusion of our webinar. You can find it on our website, socialinnovation.ucr.edu. After Gary, we'll have a presentation. Actually, it'll be a blended presentation, including Stacy Cumberbatch from Blended Impact. So Stacy will be presenting some data that she analyzed for us from Crunchbase, as well as other stakeholder work that informs the report. And then I'll follow up with some recommendations. Then we'll be treated to perspectives from outside the region. Stacy will be moderating that conversation, and then I'll be moderating the discussion in terms of views from ecosystem partners within the region. We'll have some time for additional Q&A, and then we'll talk about next steps. Next slide.
So hi, everybody. My name is Gary Redberg, and I'm the research manager at the Center for Social Innovation. Actually, Eric, could you go to the next slide? And I'll be taking you through some of the background about what an innovation ecosystem is. It's different components, some of the innovation sectors in the IEN. I have some data to present before I hand it over to Stacy, who will walk us through some blended impact crunch-based data analysis. So first off, there are many different ways to define an innovation ecosystem. There's a lot of literature out there and even more diagrams that you can look at. But in simple terms, an innovation ecosystem is a cluster. This can be physical or virtual that house innovation activities and around specific themes. An ecosystem could be built off of a certain sector, or it could be a regional ecosystem containing many different sectors. Within the ecosystem, all of these actors are interconnected. They generally co-evolve capabilities around a shared set of technologies, knowledge, or skills. The idea is to work cooperatively, but also competitively to develop new products and services. It's also important to note that an innovation ecosystem is not static. It's constantly evolving, just to the very disruptive nature of innovation to systems. So a healthy ecosystem should be both fluid and dynamic. Beyond economic development, innovation ecosystems ultimately benefit the local community living in the region through a variety of things like opportunities, increasing revenues and resources, and contributing to a region's sense of place as well. So it's really important that we understand the community's role in an ecosystem, not just as consumers or workers, but as their own foundational block. You can go to the next slide, Eric. So like I mentioned before, there are many different ways to think about an innovation ecosystem. From all the research we've done, sifting through many diagrams, we've found that almost all of them, at the very least, contain these core components that you see here. So colleges and universities, they're an engine for innovation and a catalyst for development. Beyond that role, they can also improve the quality of the labor pool, transferring technology to industry, and engaging the attractiveness of the local environment for entrepreneurs and investors as well. In terms of industry, it's also an engine for innovation, but they have well-connected supply chain networks, built-in consumer markets, and other essential components of the system that actually help the ecosystem produce innovative products and services, getting it into the hands of people that are going to be using it. Community and community organizations are the bridge between the local community and other components on this diagram. So community orgs help by focusing on a specific issue and sometimes rallying the community around it. They also work to help build up capacity as well in the region. Government is also very important. The government sets up competition-based rules that facilitate these linkages and networks. And it can be at a number of different levels, federal, state, or local. And the government regards its role as a facilitator and promotes innovation through market mechanisms, indirect incentives, and things like that. It also contributes to the sense of community in place. And investment and funding, also very, very important. Capital and monetary support allows the innovation ecosystem to function and helps new and innovative products enter existing markets. Next slide, Eric. So I know we're on a time constraint, so I'll go through a little bit faster because I know we have several slides to get to. But figure 3, which is based off some research by Jackson in 2011, this shows the relationship between the commercial economy and the knowledge economy. It shows the direct link between technological breakthroughs, or you could call it innovation, and increased sales and profit. So that's that through line, that red line, dotted line there. R&D investments start on the knowledge side. Once innovation occurs, it transitions into it can transition into the commercial economy. Then you ask the question, is this new thing commercially viable? What is the marketplace like? Then the technology is turned into new products or services and hopefully sold, increasing profits and sales. And then ideally the revenue could be fed back into more R&D resources, completing the cycle. Next slide, Eric. Nice. So it's important to note that innovation can happen and should happen really in every sector. So here we're just looking at sectors that have recently had important innovations and have had a large impact on the region's ecosystem. Historically, the economy of the IE has changed over time, from the citrus boom in the late 1880s to more recent e-commerce and healthcare, and we have a lot of growing tech sectors as well. So specifically, we highlight these sectors here in the report and provide some historical and recent examples of innovation as well. Next slide, Eric. So starting in the 1880s, the IE experienced a big citrus boom, which led to large growth in capital and in the population. The market had opened up because of new refrigerated boxcar technology, actually, that allowed for longer shipping. So growers in the region banded together and lobbied the state for a citrus research center that ultimately became UCR. And today, recent developments in AI and machine learning are really changing the agricultural landscape. So for example, last year UCR was awarded a $10 million grant from the USDA to work on some of these smart farming technologies. Next slide, Eric. Most of the early years of biotechnology in the region were based around ag tech. So this is like fertilization, pest control, and those type of things. Since then, there's been a shift towards more biomedical research. So both UCR with its life science incubator and the UCR School of Medicine and Loma Linda University have been working in this field as well, often with industry partners. Next slide, Eric. So historically, the IE has been a region that has struggled with air quality issues for a number of reasons. There have been great accomplishments, but more still needs to be done. There are new innovations in clean logistics and electrification that will hopefully change the landscape of the goods movement, reducing pollution, rerouting trucks away from communities. One example here is CARB is currently building their new Southern California headquarters right next to UCR's campus, and CARB and UCR have actually partnered to ensure that UCR students have the opportunity to do research within CARB, train, and possibly work at the center as well. So just quickly, creative arts and placemaking, those are going to be the type of things like the City of Riverside's Art and Innovation campaign. We talk a little bit about an art cluster in Coachella Valley. You can read more about that in the report. Next slide, Eric. So healthcare and delivery, very important as well here. We talk a lot about the history with Loma Linda University, and also a lot of the innovations with the IEHP, the Inland Empire Health Plan. Information technology, we have to talk about Esri and Redlands, and also cybersecurity center out at CSUSB. More information about that will be in the report as well. See, we have so many innovative stuff here. It's hard to get through them all. Okay, next slide, Eric. Social impact, huge section of the report as well. There's a lot of nonprofits in the area doing really great work that we highlight in the report as well. And again, education and workforce, really, really important. Places like GIA, Grown Inling Achievement, also One Future Coachella Valley are doing really good work. So we also, we conducted interviews for this report, and here are just some of the common themes that came out. A lot of participants talked about, the really great assets in the region, but they also noted that not a lot has been done to really showcase them to the outside region. So more work needs to be done there, but they also noted a couple of these things as well, more investment in mentorship programs and things like that. Okay, getting into the data. So for this report, we looked at several different indicators to get a better understanding, starting with education. This graph shows the total number of degrees being awarded by universities in the IE from 2014 to 2019. It includes master's and BA degrees. So you can see there's a steady increase since 2014, indicating, a ready workforce and a skilled workforce. And we see a pie chart here. So this represents the share of graduating students in the Inland Empire by top 10 majors. The green is 21.7. That represents all other majors that are not in the top 10. And many of the ones that are in the top 10 are related to the innovation sector. For example, the largest is business management and marketing. So the next table, we look at job postings over time for the innovation sector, and we define all that in the report. But interesting, you can see these job postings for this sector have risen for all regions, but specifically for the Inland Empire, with San Bernardino having a 101.2% increase in job postings since 2016 in this sector, the IE overall having 88.1. And part of that, we looked at the job posting data. There were a bunch of different types of skills that were mentioned in these postings for innovation sector related jobs. And here are a few that were just very common that we looked at. But we've noticed that these type of skills are starting to be mentioned a lot more, even in non-traditional sectors, kind of indicating that the job market is moving towards a more technical nature.
Okay, so I think, let's stop the screen share for a second because I'd like to bring up Stacy Cumberbatch before we reshare the screen. So I just want to note that Stacy Cumberbatch and Blended Impact has been such an important partner in this work. Stacy's been in the region for a little over a year now, or maybe just about a year. Is that right, Stacy?
About a year and a half.
Year and a half. And just been really incredible with the background and connections and expertise that she brings from her work in LA, and really helping to better connect the region within itself, but even with partners in Los Angeles. So welcome, Stacy, and I think it's probably sharing the slides again, and so I think we can put that back up.
Thank you so much. And just as a short introduction, my name is Stacy Cumberbatch, and I'm with Blended Impact, which is a private social enterprise that works to advance investments in real estate and high growth companies, particularly through the use of alternative financing, such as Opportunity Zone Capital and other. I have the pleasure of working in Riverside for the past year and a half, leading the Opportunity Zone initiative alongside the county. So when Karthick asked me to help take this deep dive into the innovation ecosystem, I was more than thrilled to help. And I offered to do this Crunchbase analysis and pull in different ecosystem partners in Southern California to share out our work. I think there's a lot happening here. I've been seeing it on the ground, but really to get some numbers behind it, looked at Crunchbase, which has over 2,500 companies that are tagged to the Inland Empire region, and analyzed it across a number of factors. There are over 30 slides that I prepared for this. I'll only go through about 10 today in the interest of time. But if you'll go to the next slide, I'll start sharing and just let you know that this is a little bit of sizzle to give you some highlights, but Karthick's research and the team's research is a lot more of the stake. There's over 60 pages of materials that I'd encourage you to read as soon as it's released, because he did a really deep dive. But these are just the highlights of where we've been, and he's going to be indicating where we're going, for example. How this was done, a number of companies that were tagged to the Inland Empire region is headquartered here, analyzing and taking out the closed companies, anything that was denoted as a nonprofit, and as well stopping the analysis through December of 2020. Unless I say otherwise, this is considered a full timeline of the region, but keep in mind this is also a fraction of the region, being that not all companies will report to Crunchbase. So there's much more activity out there. This is simply a snapshot of the region, and I'll do my best to represent it well. Next slide, please. And again, a disclaimer that this is just a proxy and not full market activity. Next slide. Okay, so looking at where the majority of companies are headquartered and according to clusters, Riverside, Ontario, Temecula, it kind of is split evenly between San Bernardino and Riverside counties, and you'll see the top companies or the top headquarters are represented here. What's interesting, and you'll see on the next slide, is that the headquartered companies differ a little bit from the most popular cities to found in, where the companies indicated that they were actually found. If you look to number 4, the Lucerne Valley, for example, comes in at number 4. However, in other data that I do not have time to present, there's been a bit of decline over the past years in terms of companies being founded there. There is, however, an incline in companies being founded in the Murrieta or Corona areas, for example. Next slide, please. Cluster sectors. Not all of our cluster sectors can be represented accurately simply because we have some emerging areas that are not in Crunchbase categories, such as clean tech or agri-tech, which companies would have selected broader categories for. So some of these would come under software, or they would come under energy, for example, when I'm doing spot checks. Other companies, we have a large manufacturing base currently, and those are typically broken out according to different categories, such as they may have denoted themselves as food and beverage, or they may denote themselves as architecture in the case of some that I pull up when they're producing modular housing or tiny houses or things of that nature. So even the manufacturing category could be a bit larger, but it was broken down even more by the companies themselves, depending on how they considered their primary industry. Looking at the anchor entities in the region, we do have a number of approaching $1 billion or more companies, the largest being Esri, which is based in San Bernardino, Stater Brothers. We also look to the Borns Company here in Riverside, for example, as our large anchor entities on the Riverside site. IPOs, total over time, 28 IPOs with a propensity towards being IPO'd on NASDAQ or on the OTC, for example. There is not as much data in terms of the dollars that were raised at IPO because these can be private figures. So only 6 of the 28 actually disclose the amount that they raised. This 347 million, for example, is quite a bit more. Let's look at the ones that were IPO'd in the region. Okay, on the NASDAQ, we've had Aditext, which IPO'd just in 2020. That is our most recent IPO. They IPO'd at 11 million. This is, I believe, a Riverside company, if I'm not mistaken, but don't quote me. I need to look back at the raw data. Monster, for example, was one of the ones that IPO'd with the largest amount of employees also on the NASDAQ. And when we go back later in years, we see that Provident or Citizens Banks also IPO'd on the NASDAQ. Acquired companies. We've had 6 times as many acquired companies as IPOs. So there's quite a lot of acquisitions being the dominant way to have the acquired companies happen, and with a smaller propensity towards mergers and leverage buyouts. The largest was a $6 billion acquisition that happened in 1999, and the most recent was in the end of December of last year. Canopy Crop Management was acquired by Grow Generation. In the region, Hub International is acquiring the most companies. They have acquired about 7 companies already in the region. Notable companies that are acquiring: Adidas, Ryder, Hormel. They're all looking to the area. Evolution Fresh, for example, was acquired by Starbucks. Companies that are in the region that's actually acquiring as well. Again, we see Esri. They've acquired 6 companies overall. Borns has acquired 3, Water Intelligence. So we have our own activity that's happening based on companies here that's also growing. Overall funding stages, we see the propensity of funding going to seed rounds with the majority of companies reporting funding happening at the seed stage. And then on the next slide, you may see some interesting activity in terms of what else is happening. I found it really interesting that equity crowdfunding is now coming up as a major way that companies are raising funding in the region when they're reporting the amounts that they've raised. Who's investing in the region? Tech Coast Angels has been reporting heavily alongside other partners such as New Chip and Creative Destruction Lab. We have the Highlander Venture Fund, which was launched in 2017, that does not report to Crunchbase, but they have made investments in the region at quite a significant amounts as well. And just a snapshot of who invested last year, in case anyone wants to know who are the most active in 2020. Top equity funded companies, 100 million raised from Sprizzy. This was in 2019, a company based in Colton. They manufacture drinks. When you look to Gold Star came in second at 40 million, for example, all the way down to a company, a biotechnology company in Loma Linda who raised 5 million. This is across all time. I wanted to see some big numbers in terms of what has been raised in the region. I don't think it's publicized enough what equity has been raised in the region. So just a quick top 10 of what's been happening. Who's been investing? Mark Cuban, 2010, invested in a company that's since been acquired. Draper University and Tech Coast Angel was leaders in 2020 in terms of investments. Plant Prefab, 2018, and Alexa Fund invested in them. So there are quite a number of major players that are looking at our region. And what I found interesting when I broke it down by funding type is that debt financing came in as a major player, 152 million raised by the Wheel Group in Ontario. So folks are looking at alternative ways to raise capital in this region, crowdfunding debt. And as I mentioned, I'm working with a number of companies that are looking at opportunity zone capital as well. So if you'll go to the next slide, I'll just share a breakdown of what I've seen so far via crowdfunding and has been verified across various platforms. And this does not include the figure that was raised by the top equity funded company, for example, Riverside, who also raised an additional 6 million in equity crowdfunding, separate from the amount that they raised in equity. And I believe I'll close it out there. Yeah. And we'll share some more as we move on.
Great, thank you, Stacy. And if you can go to the next slide, please. I'll just be very quick here, folks. There's a lot that's been coming at you here, but I think that's maybe part of the effect. There is a lot that's going on. We need to update our regional narratives and mindsets. We have a kind of monoculture when we think about our region in terms of what the economic activity is in our region, and we really need to update our understanding. It's not helpful either from a governance perspective or an investor perspective or an entrepreneur perspective or a workforce perspective. There are different regulations and incentives that can play a role, and certainly with a focus by the Biden administration on climate resilience, clean energy, clean transportation, and racial equity, we have a big opportunity here. We're encouraged by what we see in terms of greater regional connectivity. Improvements in broadband access is going to be critical, especially in our more remote areas and rural areas, but also in some of our central city areas. We also call for more support and investment in R&D, and this will come through in some of the conversations we'll have with our panelists, with especially federal dollars coming down. Can we be imaginative in terms of what, not just what a recovery looks like, but what the future economic direction of this region could look like, and the social impact that it can have. Education and workforce training is an important area that continues needing attention and support. We also see the need for more mentorship for folks within each of these sectors and across sectors at different stages of their career. So I'll leave it at that, and I'll turn it over to Stacy. Let's just put up the slide, but then stop the screen share. We'll just see the names of all the folks that are in our distinguished panel of views from outside the region. So if you can stop the screen share, Stacy, go ahead and help lead our panel.
Awesome. So wanted to kick it off and get some initial views from our panelists in terms of thoughts on the report that Karthick and team prepared. As I mentioned, this was over 60 pages long, so you're getting a very brief snapshot of this. The panelists all received a copy of this last week, so they've had some time to review in-depth workforce, emerging industries, and the direction that the IE is going. So I think I'll go to you first, Cecilia. If you'll please give us an introduction, share a bit about your company, your work, and what your thoughts are, what your key takeaways were.
Great, thanks, Stacy. I'll go briefly about what I do because I really want to talk about the report.
Awesome.
Solano Advisors is an urban planning and public policy consulting firm. We advise government agencies, philanthropy, nonprofits around how to build vibrant communities that are all about racial and economic equity. Better World Group, which I am also the CEO of, is an environmental consulting and advocacy firm. And we focus a lot on trying to make sure that we have a future that's worthy of our next generation. So we do a lot of work around climate, water, public lands, et cetera. So let me tell you my thoughts. I've done a lot of work on economic development through most of my career. I mean, I've advised folks from the County of Los Angeles to Erie County, where is the home of Buffalo, New York, to South County, San Diego, to Glendale, California, on stuff related to tech, equitable transportation, equitable economic development. So here are the things that stand up. One, congratulations on getting the report done, Karthick, because I absolutely agree with you. So much about building an ecosystem is crafting a narrative so people within the region know its assets. And here you have in a report kind of all the data points you need at your fingertips and a really nice survey of the assets of the community. So that's super important. One, just it's great to see it all in one place because I don't think that there's been a report quite like this done for the IE. Second, the thing that stands out to me is the emphasis, and you talked about it, Stacy, that there's a lot of talk around social innovation. We mentioned it in the framing of the report, but that's unusual in a report that's talking about innovation and economic development. And I think that's significant because the IE is coming out of this deficit narrative. We really need to talk about assets. We also need to make sure that we include in the formulation of the direction of the IE, the communities that have been most affected by its current state. And cataloging all of the different groups working on this economy is really important because it says to folks who want to partner, here are some of the folks you can turn to who are already engaged. So on some of the substantive stuff in the report, from where I sit, I think one of the most exciting pieces is around clean transportation and air quality. What we see is having that lab from the California Air Resources Board is an enormous asset for UCR, but also looking at the saltancy and potentially lithium mining. So here's what I want to emphasize is that I'm sitting in Los Angeles. You know, we used to talk about having the worst air quality in the region. Unfortunately, the IE has some of the worst air quality in terms of particulate matter in the whole region. It's also a place that has borne the brunt of this shift to logistics because of the vast warehousing and the diesel trucks that are coming in and really polluting the environment there. And it's causing all kinds of air quality impacts for communities of color in particular and working class folks in particular. It also is not necessarily creating good middle class career pathway jobs. So what you can do in the IE, because of the innovation economy that you all have detailed in this report, is to become the center, a center for new technology, particularly around heavy duty vehicles, medium duty vehicles. They're a critical element of this logistics and warehousing explosion that we've seen happening. So we have to clean up the vehicles. We also have to fuel the vehicle. So whether it's hydrogen or electricity, we need to come up with a new and readily accessible fuel source. And lithium is a super important asset. So if we can figure out how we can mine the lithium for purposes of battery technology, that will be critical. But we aren't going to be able to get there unless we engage the communities who might be most affected by this new industry. So I note that having a detailed description of all the folks working in Coachella Valley, all the folks working in Imperial County who are addressing air quality, environmental justice, that gives a pathway for industry, entrepreneurs, investors to say, here's who I need to partner with and bring into the conversation from the get-go to make sure that I have a compelling narrative, a good business plan, and a way for us to attract investment nationally into this region. The last thing I want to say is, I think that the IE is sort of one of this unsung incredible regions. And it's really nice to see that narrative detailed in a report that has the data behind it. And Stacy, I really liked your presentation, even though you ran through it really fast. I mean, you know, Esri is a powerhouse, but this Sky High group, I don't know what it is, but I started Googling it because part of what we do also is stuff around urban air mobility. So if it has anything to do with that, I think IE should really look at, could it be a center for these new types of urban air mobility, which, you know, in the pandemic, we've learned how important it is to have quick delivery of goods and services. So I'm going to stop there and say I'm delighted that this is on the table because I advise a lot of local governments and they're going to need this data to attract the investment you're talking about.
Completely agree, and cannot agree more. And I want to lift up the comments you made about clean air and clean and sustainable transportation, for example. There's a lot of work that's coming out of the city of Riverside, for example, and around that CARB area, UCR, the Oasis project that's coming to life, where the city's putting a lot of effort and thought and consideration around this. So I think that we'll see more coming out of the region there, and I'm glad that conversation is already starting to take place. I think, Matt, I'll go to you next. If you'll please unmute yourself and do a quick introduction and share what were your thoughts, what jumped out at you from the report.
Yeah, thanks, Stacy. It's always hard to follow Cecilia, so thanks for that. The Milken Institute, where I work at the Center for Regional Economics and California Center. And through the work of the California Center, we kind of see California as this great big pilot project for regional economic development. If you can make it in California, you can make it anywhere, and if you can scale in California, you have immediate global impact. So looking at a region the size of in terms of population that rivals Dallas, and to Cecilia's point about how do we leverage assets, that's what really jumped out at us and is really reflected in some of our past research, especially in a report that I think is gaining new traction that we did all the way back in 2015, which was about California's innovation-based economy and some of the policies that we thought that the legislature and local leaders should be looking at in order to harness and almost democratize innovation hubs around the state. And I think, looking at our post-COVID realities in terms of economic growth and the imperative on equity that we're now seeing, how do we leverage our assets? How do we drive place-based investments? How do we look at directing those investments into talent and infrastructure in order to sow the seeds of long-term and resilient growth is really what's on the table here. So whether those be harnessing our opportunity zones to drive business formation and sector growth, the region doesn't have a corporate headquarters of a Fortune 500 company. Those things aren't just going to trickle down. Those are the things that we need to sow the seeds of if we want to capture those types of business formation, business attraction, and even direct foreign direct investment opportunities to some of our assets and how we're positioning the region for future growth, especially around opportunities like in Cecilia was talking about around renewable energy transmission, capture and storage. That's a global competitiveness conversation. No other region in terms of the United States has the types of lithium deposits that the region has. Those aren't just innovation opportunities. Those are jobs, spillover effects that create more mom and pop and small businesses that we need to find a way to capture. So to that point, looking at the cyclical chart that Karthick and the team put into the report is really embodied in some of that Milken research that I and reflected in that Milken research that I referenced earlier. So the looking at at different points and different cycles of regional innovation hub and life cycle creation, how we're leveraging federal, state, and local R&D funding, how we're positioning that R&D funding to our universities and our research in the concept to commercialization engine, how we're harnessing that concept to commercialization into patents and licenses of new technology. Those are creating businesses, and that's all for the public sector to really lean in on and put the shoulder to the wheel and say, how can we grease the skids? How can we wrap our arms around the innovation that's coming out of the region as a competitiveness play? And how can the state help us do this from a sector-driven growth perspective? How do we align incentives? How do we make sure that the region is broadcasting what it is that it's intending to do is really that strategic innovation part of that regional innovation life cycle that is really great to see in the report and like I said, embodied in some of the Milken research that we've done in the past and looking to promote more in the future from these types of regional pilots, hopefully with the types of investments and financial solutions that the state can offer, but also the local governance and regional planning on economic development initiatives and the imperative that we're wrapping around here. So I might have had too much coffee. I know I'm going whirlwind, but I'll pause there and wait for more engagement.
And we appreciate your perspective, Matt, on the national level. And I think we're already planting those seeds. We're in the perfect position, here in Riverside, anchoring into clean tech, for example, looking to San Diego and looking to the OC and looking to LA, who already have their clean tech hubs, to, for example, create a Southern California or regional clean tech, clean air consortium. I mean, we're in the perfect position to help catalyze something like that. And this is just speaking from my external point of view, but I'll start turning it over to the other panelists, because I know you have regional views and you're very active in actually implementing a lot of these things. So Eric, for example, I'll go to you next, and I'll combine both questions. What stood out to you from the report? Please introduce yourself. What stood out to you, and how can we combine or catalyze our regions to work better with other regions, for example, or better connect the Inland Empire ecosystem with what you're working on?
Stacy, thanks so much. The Alliance for Southern California Innovation is a non-for-profit that was founded about 3.5 years ago with the mission of really trying to elevate Southern California for a place of innovation. And we do that by super connecting across the region, all the stakeholders that really support founders. So we work closely with universities, corporates, venture capitalists, entrepreneurs, cities, and community organizations. One of the key things we do locally is to really try to help communities inventory their assets and key innovation players and find their story. We're lucky to have Boston Consulting Group as a strategic partner who helped us do a lot of this initial work in 2018. What I'm so excited and have been struck by in the report is how much farther UC Riverside, Karthick and Gary specifically went and doing a deeper dive to really extend what we know is what exists locally, and how we could connect and what the opportunities are. Once we really know what the assets and players are and what our narrative is and what we as a region want to be, we could start telling that story and building things on top of it. The Alliance has been lucky to be involved with the Oasis project that already came up in the call, and we've helped bring Amazon Web Services and Edison to kind of really to understand what the opportunity is that can help solve and build upon industry promise, but also solve the environmental justice issues and clean up the air. And they're super interested in what they've found. And so that's just one example of what we could do when we start aligning these pieces. So that we're super excited about that and the opportunities ahead. Looking ahead to the second question about how can we better connect the Inland Empire to the region, and this really goes to the heart at what the Alliance tries to do. And in some ways, the current pandemic has made it easier and removing some of the friction that we used to face driving. I mean, digital divide issues aside, but we're able to connect the region in a number of ways through virtual events or through a digital platform that we've been able to launch with generous underwriting from Verizon. We also have local events like the First Look SoCal Innovation Showcase, which is happening on June 16th and 17th, which is an annual showcase that all SoCal research universities, including UCR, participates in and really showcases the best companies and innovations that are coming off of campuses that have the promise to commercialize. We're also unveiling a regional branding campaign that really talks about universal truths for the SoCal region, but is designed to be that local communities can adapt and tailor that. And we look forward to working with the Inland Empire to help there, because we've got a compelling story to tell. We want to help get it out there. We think that helps all of us. Finally, I wanted to talk about, quickly highlight a new program that we're launching just this month called the SoCal Venture Pipeline, brought to you by Silicon Valley Bank, which is a capital matching program that is really designed to help founders access their first institutional round of venture capital, which continues to be a huge logjam for our SoCal region, including in the IE. And this program is live now. Companies are able to apply. It doesn't cost them anything. And if they're accepted into the program, they are matched they're shopped around to a national VC syndicate of over 400 investors that don't tend to live in Southern California. So we're trying to bridge that capital divide and hopefully create more jobs and great companies in the IE. Thank you.
Amazing initiative. And Eric, I have to say, the perfect timing that you're launching this as we're in the middle of our innovation month here in Riverside. So we'll have a number of companies that we'll have ready to send your way. Thank you, Eric. And last but not least, on this section of the panel, I'd love to invite Stephen to unmute, and please introduce yourself, share your thoughts, and how can we better connect with the work that you're doing at LAEDC as well.
Thank you, Stacy. Good to see everybody. I will answer all three questions, hopefully together at once. So LADC, we're the LA County Economic Development Corporation. I also serve a separate role with the World Trade Center in Los Angeles. Our job is to utilize our research, macroeconomic research, to look at the global trends and macroeconomic trends that are affecting the Los Angeles region and our industry. So for example, globalization, digitalization, automation, what that means to the very unique industries that are here in this region, and then look at the impact it has on our workers. Utilizing that information, then we create our programs. Business attraction, for example, international attraction. How do we attract the right types of companies to locate here in the Los Angeles region? And then also align the industries with our workforce development system to make sure that our next generation of workers are upskilled, retrained, or entering the workforce are trained properly so they can enter the workforce. So all this is about the ecosystem. And the ultimate goal for LADC and World Trade Center is to advance opportunity for all residents of folks that live here in Los Angeles so that we can elevate our standard of living. And with that said, the report, it's about talking about the ecosystem. So I'm going to step back a little bit and looking at everything that was presented before between the biotech, the clean tech, the healthcare, and all these great industries that are thriving in this region. We need to look at it from a competitive standpoint. We have other states, Arizona, Nevada, Texas, that's been, kind of chomping at the bits, kind of on the heels, trying to attract these companies from our region. And I think what we need to look at as we're looking at recovery, and one of the things that we did with LADC is we had a report looking at the COVID-19 impact on our economy. In LA County alone, within the first 2 months of COVID-19, of the 4.5 million workers that were within the Los Angeles County region, we lost 770,000 jobs in the first 2 months. And we were only able to recover a portion of that. At the current moment, we're still about 550,000 jobs short in that region. In order for us to grow, we really have to look at our regional economy as a whole to see how we can remain competitive. Matt mentioned the FDI perspective, the foreign direct investment. We need to attract the right types of companies over here, helping our entire region grow. And that's why, for me, I think in terms of what the Inland Empire can do and what we can do together is to create this massive ecosystem. So when people are looking at us, they're not looking at individual cities. We're looking at this entire ecosystem that has all the assets. And I think Cecilia is mentioning it as well as Matt talking about the sustainability sector, the lithium aspect, right? When we're talking about sustainability, people utilize that against us in many ways, saying that California, Los Angeles region, and Southern California has been so environmentally progressive that it's making it difficult for people to do business. Well, you know what? It's creating an entire industry of electric vehicle, whether it's trucks, whether it's cars, whether it's medium size, and and the infrastructure that's necessary. Fast charging station, the grid system, all of these need to be located here. And I think with all the assets that are here, if we can align our work, then we can be really competitive in terms of attracting these companies. I'll close by saying, one of the things that we can do, again, this is nothing new. We know that we have to collaborate, but we've been talking about collaboration for a long time. The time has come right now for us to actually dedicate the resources. In order for us to collaborate, you need to have dedicated staff, dedicated resources, so that we can communicate with each other to make sure that our programs are aligned, that we're not duplicating services. So looking forward to working very closely, with this partnership with all the folks here to make sure that we're able to get to that point where we can collaborate more closely.
Amazing. I think that's the perfect way to end this panel, Stephen. Thank you for your comments, and thank you to all the panelists. It's really encouraging to see not only your interest, but enthusiasm for the region and next steps in wanting to connect more in and tie our regions together. So with that, I'll turn it over to Karthick to continue on with our next group of panelists.
And actually, yeah, before the folks leave, let me just say, first of all, I took a screenshot of this on the speaker view because, first of all, just thank you, not only for coming here today, but more generally for not only having that vision, but your commitment to making sure that we think about this regional interdependence. And just a couple of quick remarks I wanted to make. I think Cecilia highlighted this, and a bunch of others did too. When you look across the globe, really, in terms of where innovations tend to pop the most, it's when societies confront their thorniest problems, right? There's a reason why robotics is so advanced in Japan. They have an aging and shrinking population, so they have to get, robotics is so critical for the long-term success of that society. I would say similarly, when it comes to environmental technology, it is so critical to Southern California. We love our cars, we love our freeways, and we also love our goods and the e-commerce that comes with it. But unfortunately, it's created a set of challenges. But if we actually spent our mind and our talents addressing those challenges, not only will we solve our problem that we face here, the solutions we find here will be globally consequential. So that's one thing I'm really hopeful that comes out of today, is that if there is a brand, I mean, of course, there's entertainment tech. That's an important part of the tech brand in Los Angeles in particular, although there's parts of it in Riverside County as well, and some parts in San Bernardino County. But if we can focus on that being the global brand of innovation for Southern California, I think there's so much that we can achieve, including some of the Lithium Valley work where our center is working with a whole bunch of community partners to make sure that they are able to not only benefit, but have a say in what that future looks like. So thank you, everyone, for joining us. And I'll call on our speakers from the region, ecosystem partners in the region. So first, I want to call up Rob Moran from Riverside County. And if we can get Rob highlighted, that'd be great. Okay, so Rob, just given, first of all, if you can just do a little bit of intro in terms of what Riverside County is doing with respect to innovation sectors in the region. But given what you just heard from the prior panel, Rob, and even from what you've read, what can you share in terms of how our region can better connect up with those allies from outside the region?
Great question, Karthik, and thanks very much. That's probably a whole panel in and of itself for another day. But first of all, thank you and to your team, to Gary and Paula, for putting this together. Just the mere fact that we're able to do this in this day and time is indicative of some of the progress that this region's made with the innovation ecosystem. I promise you, and Karthik, you and I were talking about this yesterday, we wouldn't really be able to do this 10 years ago. And I'm going to limit my comments to sort of the tech and some of the tech transfer. I want to make sure that Dr. Stoll from Cal State San Bernardino gets a lot of credit, because he's been in this space with entrepreneurship and taking people's ideas and turning them into businesses for a long, long time. And he's been a partner of the counties for many years. But I'm gonna focus more so on kind of like the clean tech and some of the stuff that UCR is doing in terms of technology transfer. But I want to make sure that doesn't get left out in this whole discussion. And for a long time, his team and him have made significant contributions to our ecosystem. And again, I want to make sure that's not lost at all. But yeah, I think, for a long time, and sort of related to my comment about not being able to do this 10 years ago, I think we've had to kind of get our house in order and before we can take this out on the road, so to speak. And meaning that for years and years, we have been developing this sort of tech ecosystem here in the region, and I'll speak directly to Riverside County. A lot of effort with UCR, the EPIC Small Business Development Center, and really taking individuals that have these ideas at UCR, which has been a really rich, fertile ground for ag tech, clean tech. CSERT's been around for 20 plus years in the transportation sector, and taking those folks who are really researchers and, in a sense, and I'm simplifying it, turning them into business people or connecting them with business people so they can transfer that technology out into the marketplace. And that has taken quite some time. And I really want to applaud UCR, Brian Suh and David Pearson, who's on here, and Rosabelle Ochoa. this has been, I always call it kind of a brass knuckle effort. It's a day by day effort to develop that ecosystem. And I always simplify it by saying you need ideas, mentorship, and money. And the ideas come from essentially the private sector, the entrepreneurs. And you need the mentorship. It's folks like David and many of his colleagues that can help, guide them, who've been down that path before, who can show them the ropes. And then of course, the money, the funding, the capital investment, whether it's opportunity funds or venture capital or angel capital. And that's taken, years to develop here. And so I think what you're seeing is that the timing is fortuitous. It's really finally congealing and coming together, where I think we can take that message out to other areas, because we've had, there's been years where we just haven't had the deal flow for some of these investors to come in and invest. And I think that's no longer the case. And I think it is important to engage with some of these folks. And the lady mentioned, Miss Estelano mentioned the CARB and clean tech. That, of course, is a huge effort for the county, the city of Riverside, UCR, and again, the state even, because CARB is we view that as a catalyst project for this region. And that is going to attract businesses from not just the region or the country, but from around the world that need to engage with CARB. And they're going to want to have a presence in this region. And there's going to be new technologies that are developing from UCR in the region as a result of having CARB here. And so we've already formed, alliances with the aforementioned group, to develop a business attraction and growth plan for that. And that's occurring. And like I said, UCR is a huge partner in that effort, the city chamber, and I could go on and on.
So yeah, I'm gonna pause you there for a second,
okay,
Rob, because we're gonna come back to you. I'm gonna invite up. So thank you for that context and perspective, historical perspective especially. I'm gonna bring up Chris Gray from WRCOG, who can give a little bit of intro about WRCOG and its interest in the space. But Chris, your perspective on how we can, better connect what's happening not only within our region, but with what's going on in other counties like San Diego, Orange, and LA.
Yeah, thanks, Karthik. My name is Chris Gray, and I'm the Deputy Executive Director of WRCOG. We're a regional agency that includes the county, all 18 cities in West Riverside County. So we touch on issues ranging from transportation, economic development, housing, jobs. And part of our interest in the space is, I saw a question in the chat about housing costs and the like, is we actually see economic development as a way to spur housing production, because if people have better jobs, they'll be able to buy the houses and people will build more houses. But we've been looking into this space for the last couple of years. And Karthik, one thing I'd shared with you previously is, I want to quote from some page 53 of the report, or the version I read, which said, quote, "A bright spot that many interviewees noted was the existing collaboration in the innovation sector, particularly in terms of local government entities. Many local governments have been playing a facilitator role, bringing together different parts of the ecosystem. While this collaboration is good, some of the participants also said that this collaborative effort needs to be more centralized." So when we have done research and work in this space, we have found that to be very much the case. There are a number of some very creative, very entrepreneurial, I don't know a better way of saying that, people working in this space. And what typically happens is entrepreneurs go to their chamber, their local business, their local city, maybe they get past the city manager's office, economic development director, who knows. But what we find is there's no really one-stop shop. So I wanted to put a plug in. If anything comes out of this effort, I think there needs to be a recognition that there should be at least a one-stop shop, or maybe multiple one-stop shops. Maybe it's Cal State San Bernardino and Excite, but I wanted to put a pitch together that WRCOG and Riverside County EDA, Rob Moran, have been working on something called Innovation Month. So we've been co-promoting Innovation Month. And what I wanted to say is, if for this to be successful, we see there needs to be a couple of centers, and the centers need to be broadly drawn, and they need to be that, kind of top of the pyramid, one-stop shop. And I don't think we need to recreate anything. I think there's already a number of candidates out there, as I listed. But if we're going to be more successful, that to me seems to be the missing bit. And I wanted to put a shout out to I'm glad you had, I think it's Stephen from LAEDC on before this. That's what, LAEDC does. And so I don't think we need to create a new organization to do that. As I said, I think we have others that are in the room. But what we don't want to do is create 4 or 5 competing organizations. We really all just need to come together and agree. And what I would say in closing is, our region has a number of very challenging environmental transportation issues like that. But when we can come together and all argue with one voice, we're very powerful. And what we haven't seen yet on the economic development side is that one entity everyone recognizes is speaking for us all, because there's so many folks. But when it's on issues like transportation, environment, just if you don't know this, we have one of the first countywide habitat conservation plans, which became a model, and that's been in place for 20 years. So we have regional collaboration, plenty of history. We just need that one entity or a couple of entities that can be the lead. And so I wanted to put a plug for people like Rob and people like Mike, that those entities, we think those entities are in place. They just need a little bit more support to bring them up. And if we can work together collaboratively with a, someone running point, I think that would be a game changer for us, because we don't have that.
Great. Thank you, Chris. And I think even the example that you talked about in terms of that plan that's been in place for 20 years, these are also stories about our region. I've been in the region for 16 years, and I'll say I still discover new things that are so important, that are part of our histories. There's so many things we can draw upon, I think, to do this kind of forward-thinking work, right? That we're not starting from scratch in many of these things. Great. Next, I'm going to invite Mike Stoll from Cal State San Bernardino, from the Center for Entrepreneurship and the School of Entrepreneurship. So Mike, if you can just say a little bit more about both, and then your kind of thoughts and reactions, in the context of this report, of how we can up our game, as it were, and especially, with all the things we've heard from the prior panel, right? Partners in LA and other parts of Southern California, seeing this opportunity to interconnect.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Karthik. And thanks to you and your team for putting this all together. And it's a very thought-provoking report and very timely. And then thanks for the nice shout out from Rob Moran, who's been, he cited our efforts, but he's been right there with us, working across boundaries, seeing this as a region. And Rob and I have a lunch coming up, so I think I'm going to be buying lunch based on what Rob said. So, but anyways, at Cal State I play a dual role. So I'm the director of the Center for Entrepreneurship and director of the School of Entrepreneurship. Center for Entrepreneurship, which has been around since 1999, is focused and dedicated on supporting and promoting entrepreneurship and innovation in the region, and we do it through a wide range of programs, both on campus and off campus. Off campus, we serve around 10,000 business owners a year through business coaching, counseling, mentoring programs, and training programs, and programs like the Small Business Development Center, the Women's Business Center, and the State Trade Expansion Program. So we're out there working across the entire region with offices in both counties, and I've got a 60 plus members of our team that are out there doing that work. The School of Entrepreneurship is the complete other side, which is, we're the only school of entrepreneurship at a post-secondary institution in the state of California, one of less than 15 worldwide. And our whole goal is to really prepare students to be the next group of innovative change makers in the region, whether they are launching new ventures or going into existing organizations and helping infuse innovation in that entrepreneurial mindset in the organization. We have about 300 students that are studying in our program currently. So, and it's very interdisciplinary. We have programs going on with every college on our campus, including the sciences. So lots happening. More to the point on your question, Karthik, is, I think historically a lot of our institutions in the region that have been dedicated to entrepreneurship and innovation have been pretty good about engaging, individually engaging organizations. I look back at our history, and we've worked with the Army Research Laboratory and the Office of Naval Research in partnership with San Diego State University. And we've worked with Tech Coast Angels even before they were in the region. And so I think, moving forward, it's how can we collectively collaborate to really leverage our existing relationships and maybe bring more to the table from these outside entities, learn from their experiences, but also in some cases, these are funding mechanisms. And I think, obviously we've got the Tech Bridge is a great example of the Navy, and kind of really collaborating closely with them and really building something unique. But I'm going to go back to what Chris said, and this comes from Chris may remember, we had this conversation about regional coordination and collaboration maybe a year or two ago. Time flies, right, Chris? And I can't echo that enough, that for us to be successful in the region and bringing outside partners in, we're going to have to be better at coordinating our efforts and really being better at communicating within the region, but also coordinating and whether, and like Karthick, you and I talked about, whether that's a consortium coming together of the leaders to really make this thing happen. I think that's the critical next step for us, is that we have to represent a united front. We all, it was mentioned before, we have to collaborate, and we can compete too. But I think, coming together, we're going to really raise the region up if we can be coordinated and collaborative in that process.
Great.
So
thank you, Mike. Before I call on David Pearson from UCR, by the way, the folks that were in LA before, I think that is that art about, of course, there's competition and collaboration. And I don't think we have a monopoly of people going in different directions and rowing their oars in different ways. But there are moments, right? There are opportunities, and especially, I would say, with hundreds of millions of dollars coming down to our region, this would be a time to be smart and coordinated. And in our communities, it's for our communities. If we want to chart a different future for our region in terms of the jobs, in terms of that economic diversification that we need, this is probably as good a window as we're going to get.
Karthik, I just want to interject one further point is,
sure.
When we look at the money that's coming down to our region, a lot of it we think is going to go to the Workforce Development Board, Small Business Development Centers, and those are very, very important. But I would say, based on the research we do, and Mike, I think you'd concur with this, an entrepreneur needs a different level of support than a small business. If I'm running a flower shop, I need help with inventory, I need help with accounting, I need help with billing. If I'm trying to create a new, let's say, water efficiency technology, that's a completely different level of assistance. And so I would also say, as money comes to our region, we should really think about how that money is being spent, and having that central body to say, no, we need to have a carve out for innovation, or we need to have a carve out to entrepreneurs. That's going to make a huge difference. But if it just goes to the traditional models, it may not happen.
Absolutely. And I think we're all also agree that those values that we care about, like inclusion and community impact and social impact, we can't just assume those things to be true for a region that's 70% people of color, right? So, but I think that's part of what makes it so exciting in this region. So welcome to David from UCR. David, if you can introduce yourself and some of the work that Office of Technology Partnerships and some of the other work that UCR is doing in the region. And then the question I'll tee up for you, and then after this, we'll just open it up to everyone, folks, just in the interest of time, because there'll be other Q&A, is what do you think that we could do better moving forward in terms of kind of not only changing the narrative, but creating a stronger environment to support innovation and entrepreneurship?
Thanks very much for the opportunity to be part of this discussion. I think, just cutting to the chase, one of the things that this initiative can really help us do is take a sober look at where we can be competitive, to really, initiate the dialogue between us to say, what are the things that we're going to do well as a region that will attract and retain jobs, and what can we each as institutions contribute to that decision making and that focus. And I do hope that Oasis, which we've heard mentioned many times during this call, will be one of those efforts. But I'd like to go back. First of all, David Pearson, I'm the Managing Director of Entrepreneurial Programs and the Life Sciences Incubator at UC Riverside. I've been there about 2 years after 35 years in the pharmaceutical and biotechnology worlds. I'm part of Rosabelle Ochoa's technology partnerships team. And basically, we provide mentoring, customer discovery, financing, and technical assistance to about 150 technology-driven companies each year, in addition to supporting UCR faculty. And I've thought, Karthik, since you posed the question, I've been thinking about, what kind of commitment can we be making from the university to make, these visions more of a reality. And I do think there's a lot more we can do. And a lot of this may be more personal than policy statement from the university. But during the last year, our technology partnerships team provided more than 70 programs or events to support UCR and the community. And I think that there are two areas that I'd like to highlight that are more forward-looking, and you've heard a little bit about the themes. First of all, we clearly need new mechanisms for financing new companies. We do have the Highlander Venture Capital Fund, but it's quite limited in what it can do. It's made 3 investments, and maybe you can do 1 or 2 more before it needs to be refinanced. But we are working very hard now, Scott Brovsky and Martin as well, working on a new angel investor summit, which will be held November 4th. So we're going to be working to identify, educate, and empower angel investors as a mechanism for really accelerating the development of new companies here in the region. The second thing is that we realized that yes, our focus is on UCR, and yes, we do a lot with startups, but there's a huge amount of innovation and opportunity with the existing manufacturing base. And I'm talking about those couple of thousand companies that are 20 to 80 employees that have patents, that have technologies that enable them to be competitive. And what we've started is a new program called Discover UCR that we're piloting with Corona and with Murrieta Temecula in order to talk to the chief technology people, the CEOs of these manufacturing companies, and link them to UCR's facilities, faculties, student interns, and the like, to basically help them come up with better new products, better licensing or better patenting opportunities, and new technologies that will enhance their competitiveness. This has been it's a non-traditional area for university to outreach to the community, but we believe that the Inland Empire is a community of smaller, mid-sized companies, and we ought to be doing more to provide leverage to the technology and assets and people that we have. I mentioned briefly Oasis, and certainly that's a major theme for Rosabel and Rodolfo Torres, our VC Red. That's to establish a sustainability research park, which enables our region's diverse stakeholders to collaborate. And I think that's around clean energy, transportation, such as we've been discussing agriculture, and also mindful stewardship of the natural resources that we have. And of course, water and energy are amongst those. So everyone is, I mean, most of you are involved, but everyone's welcome to join. And then finally, the last comment is that I realized, from my perspective coming to the university, that we need to make a stronger commitment to be involved with initiatives like the one that you're leading us in, Karthick. Not just in coming together for a conference call like this, but being engaged for the months that you guys have been working on putting this program together, so that we have even more thoughtful preparation of the challenges and the roadmap ahead. I'm looking forward to version 2 of this meeting. It's really stimulated a lot of discussion at UCR about what it is we can be doing, which aspects we should engage with, what the partnerships are. And so for us, it's been a very stimulating chance to become involved. And on behalf of Rosabel and many others at the university, we're glad to be part of this.
Thank you so much, David. One thing I should clarify, folks, that this is not just me and also the rest of my team, but really this report was supposed to happen a year ago, but because of the pandemic, we pivoted. And David, what we've done is actually just this morning, we had our 53rd weekly call of leaders in the nonprofit sector. We get consistently about 50 to 60 people who show up, and we take a deep dive on a different issue. And I'm not saying in terms of the innovation ecosystem, we need to have weekly meetings, but if it's helpful, and it sounds like it would be, right, in terms of this relate, a lot of times we think transactionally, and we're not doing enough in terms, and we have relationships, right? But they're kind of one-off. And this is where I think, especially with all of us being much more adept at remote meetings, maybe, I didn't realize that this is an initiative. We were putting this report together, and we thought there are so much amazing things that are happening that there will be a benefit to tying it all together and also making sure that it informs the narrative. But least from what you're saying, David, and so many others here, including our prior panelists, and I'll just ask to end all the spotlights, and we can just bring everyone back on to address some of these questions that are coming up, but just even some additional thoughts from folks in that first panel, based on what you've heard, right, among those in the Inland Empire that are these ecosystem builders, right, and each one of the folks that here are. And any further reflections, one of the questions that came up in the chat, we'll get to in a minute, was about telecommuting and remote work, and how might that change the geography of what these innovation clusters look like. So I want to kind of put a pin on that for a second, but before we go there, any further thoughts and reflections from folks on either panel? Go ahead, Rob.
Karthik, I just wanted to chime
in.
in.
And then Cecilia after that. Go ahead, Rob.
Is that I think the point that there's going to be significant federal investment occurring here in the near future, I think is really a pivotal moment for us. And we at the county, we know we're going to be receiving a significant amount of funding. And depending on what we can actually do with it, because the regulations aren't finalized yet, and that will dictate what we're able to do. But based on some assumptions we're making, we want to look at some of these strategic investments, and not just as emergency response, but how do we invest in some of these key areas of our innovation ecosystem so that it has a long-term and lasting impact. And I think that's the sort of the lens that we're going to be looking at it from moving forward, not just something that's a short-term benefit. And we'll probably have some of that as well. But what are those sort of longer-term investments that we can make in some of these, projects that have been discussed today, and probably others as well.
Great. Thanks, Rob. Cecilia, on to you.
A little bit about talent, because this is something, and also tie into that telecommuting issue that you mentioned, Karthik. So here's the thing. One of the things about your report is it does a nice job detailing the composition of the workforce and also showing how Inland Empire is doing in terms of graduate students, graduate degrees, as well as BAs. So a little bit behind Southern California and the state generally. Yet you have this enormous talent pool latent here in the Inland Empire. So what I want to weave together is this notion. It's a unique place. It's a beautiful place. What we need to do is to take the incredible talent coming out of Cal State San Bernardino and even Loma Linda and UCR and keep them in the region. Get them into the graduate students in the region and keep them in the region for a number of reasons. One, we want to grow this innovation economy, and people need to be invested in this place and really take down deep roots. And so many of the students going to these universities are from the local community, and that's a huge asset. We want to show them if they stay, they can start a business, it can grow a business, they can get investment from even outside the region. So that's why when we had Stephen Chung talking about being able to access investors from all over the world, that's enormous, okay? So I want to talk about that talent piece because we do have this gap in graduate degree attainment and we need to do better on that. And we also know that UCR in particular has an extraordinary track record in essentially eliminating the achievement gap, any racial achievement gap at the university. So let's double down on that when it comes to graduate degree attainment. Let's also pitch the beauty of this place. It's affordable, relatively speaking. It is really quite affordable, but we want to make sure that we're building housing in places that make sense, that we're able to access regional networks of rail and other types of infrastructure, and that also we are taking advantage of what we've learned in the pandemic, that you can access brilliant minds sitting in the Inland Empire and you don't have to get in a car to do it. We can do it like we did right now, right? Karthik, I don't know if we would have been able to pull this together pre-pandemic, probably not, right? You got Stephen Chung, you got me, you got a bunch of folks from LA who'd be like, oh man, I don't really want to drive an hour out to UCR. But we're all here because this work is so important. And Stephen's right. We need to show the region as a region, not just a city or a county, but a region. So we need all the big brains coming out of the Inland Empire. And we want you to stay there because we want you to grow that node of innovation. And so we need to take advantage of all that we're doing in the internet with broadband. So I also want to commend you. I said it before, but I want to just underscore this. This is a roadmap for local government to, and Rob, you know about this, what local government needs to do to enhance the connectivity of that ecosystem of entrepreneurship, right? So it may mean we spend that federal dollars as much as we can on building our broadband network, on our Wi-Fi network, and making sure it gets us to every corner of the region, right? It may mean that we focus on particular types of training programs. So communities that have been left out of recoveries in the past are the first ones in line, are the first ones accessing some of that specialized training work. And we have an approach and a theory about where we should grow or the kinds of industries we can grow. And then that's why this report is important, because it's underscoring 4 or 5 or 6 really good growth opportunities, shows us the assets, and gives local government and others a roadmap on how to make it happen. So that's just the last thing I want to say. Let's not forget the latent talent in this region. That is your biggest asset. Absolutely.
Thank you, Cecilia. There's one other question that I saw. I'm going to just pitch it to anyone, and then I'm going to actually, I have a question for Stacy. Even though she was a moderator, you know, she is very much in our region now, but came from outside our region. So I'd love for you to reflect a little bit, Stacy. But the question I saw in the chat, and I'll ask a different version of it for anyone in the panel, is, you know, in terms of employee-owned firms, you know, that kind of that model, thinking about B Corp, for example, too. But also, you know, we've talked a lot about innovation and entrepreneurship as if they're interchangeable. But there's a lot of innovation that occurs in larger firms as well, right? So that's a huge question. But if anyone wants to just kind of grab a little bit, you know, in terms of what they would recommend to make sure that innovation remains at the heart of whatever we do, no matter the size of the firm, the age of the firm, et cetera. Anyone want to give any thoughts on that?
Karthik, I was just going to say, because that's something I was thinking about in the remarks, because I think also David, in kind of some of his prep notes, had mentioned that, you know, we need to be thinking about existing companies and larger companies. And it's not just startups. And having done some research on innovation and nonprofits in the past, and currently working on creating a specific training program for a government agency on innovation within the organization. Really a lot of emphasis on what can leaders do to create a culture of innovation in an organization. And that's not always intuitive or easy, but having some programs or initiatives around that, because I think you hit it right on the head. We have a lot of resources for startups, but not so many for existing companies that want to reinvent themselves and really need to understand how to embrace innovation.
Great. Thank you, Mike. Okay, now I'm going to go to Stacy. Stacy, I mean, it's yeah, good that you reminded us it's been a year and a half. Rob and I, while we're prepping for this call, remembered that we were on your interview committee when you started as a Fuse Fellow in Riverside County. And it's just, you know, I think we knew then, actually, I don't think we even imagined all that you would do in our region, but just so grateful for the ways that you've shown up here and really, you know, gone to so many different corners, especially in Riverside County, right? And seeing all the assets here. So, and I mean, especially to Cecilia's point in terms of when you talk to your buddies in LA, right? Maybe they're like, why did you move to Riverside? Like, I don't get it. But what do you tell them in terms of the assets that you see here?
And I want to thank you and Rob and everyone else on the panel, because I think I cross different sectors and sometimes it's a bit confusing, you know, what area I'm in, but that's because of the financing tool that I utilize. And so I appreciate everyone's invitation to allow me to participate on these tables and learn from you all and work alongside you all as we all work towards, you know, a common goal. I'm excited about the region. I think you all know I came out here initially on a one-year fellowship to help launch the Opportunity Zone ecosystem. Within the first 3 months, I relocated out here. I've been bugging Rob ever since. I've been because I'm so excited about what I've been seeing, not only in the city of Riverside, where I now live, but across the region, particularly, for example, on the east side of the county. When you talk about social innovation that's happening, when you talk about the clean tech, you know, aspects of things, and especially the conversations that we're having around how can we include different groups and different partners in the ecosystem. That mix of conversation is really exciting to be on the ground floor of. So I'm I'm thankful for you all allowing me a part to contribute to that. And I'll say what my contribution is on the next steps, because I think we're coming up on time. But one of the things that I do want to continue to focus on is how can we advance access to alternative capital in different populations. For example, we see the amount of venture capital that's coming in the region. It has been growing, but it still is a small percent, and that's typical for any non-coastal community. So this is not Inland Empire only, but any non-coastal community would experience the same thing. So how can we make sure that our businesses still have access to capital, even if there is a growing but lesser amount of venture capital or other types of capital? And that's what I really wanted to focus on. So that's why, for example, I look at opportunity zone capital, or I'm really excited about crowdfunding, capital, or even revenue-based financing. One of the things that I'm working on as we talk about programs and initiatives that we're developing is an alternative capital accelerator to focus specifically on that. What alternative sources of capital can we introduce to our growing businesses that will take them from that seed stage to Series A and beyond, to make sure that they're growing in this ecosystem and not leaving to others. So that's my commitment to the area. I know that you all also have others, but happy to do my share in that respect.
Great, thank you, Stacy. So we are at time. What I'll say, commitment from our center. So Stacy, it's been a real pleasure working with you on this report. When we started, we invited Stacy and Blended Impact to be a co-author, and she's like, "Well, I'm not sure. Let's see how this goes." And I'll tell you later. But we are now co-authors on this report, and we are committed as two institutions to carry forward the work. At least, you guys can shoot me the stink eye later, but I think I heard from all of the partners from outside the region that you are ready to join us. Many of you have been doing this, but to deepen that involvement, we would love your engagement. And folks with ecosystem builders within the region, thank you so much for everything that you do. And it sounds like, so David, maybe your wish of that subsequent meeting will happen sooner rather than later. So we're happy to help coordinate a working session in terms of what this looks like. I think we're making the case here and kind of tying different pieces together. But we'll get to work and make sure that we're lifting everyone up, not just anyone in one particular university or one particular county. So thank you all so much for spending an hour and a half of your time with us. The report, we're actually going to do some additional tweaks to the report based on what we heard today. There's so many insights that were shared, both in the comment box and from our panelists. Truly grateful for your engagement. And we look forward to continuing to engage in the future.